210. Let me just double check the tech and make sure we're okay. Unless somebody's already got it up.
I got it up, but nothing yet.
All right, let's see.
Oh, there it's coming.
There we are.
Is it?
We're live.
Is the sound on? Is the sound on?
Let me check. Yeah.
Test. Okay, so looks like there's already people here.
It's got 6 on live, 8 on Facebook.
I don't see it.
Yep.
Are we live?
Yep, we are.
Oh, there we are. Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
Welcome, everybody. We're here with Todd Medina and Michael Van Patten and myself, Paul Hanreider. And we're going into round 2 of our masculine live raw session. So if anybody else saw our session, what was that, about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago? Sorry, I cut out, got a phone call. There's been a lot going on since then, and tons of energy moving, and heavy, amazing, beautiful, torturous stuff all at once. So we're here to have the 3 of us discuss what our experiences are and hopefully enlighten the divine feminine and other masculines that whatever they're experiencing and seeing is probably the same thing as a lot of other people are, and that validation and that rawness is really what's going to pull us all together and heal us and move us to the new level that we're all advancing to. So very grateful to have these 2 beautiful gentlemen with me, and we're going to share from the heart.
Yeah.
Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Welcome to the firing line.
To the jungle. Yeah. So, did anybody feel called to start, or shall I continue on my role?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Michael's pointing at somebody. I think he's
assume
pointing at
Go for it, Paul. Yeah, I went first last time. I'm going to hang back for a bit.
Okay. So these 2 beautiful gentlemen have some beloveds in their life. I'm advancing to that point in my life. I felt really called. I woke up at like 4 a.m. this morning and going through a whole deep pile of healing, and I felt very called to kind of speak from my experience as a man in his 40s trying to date. I divorced almost 5 years ago. Divorced my wife for love. That's not a very normal thing. But in a relationship that was kind of sexless, and a partner that had some sexual traumas that I wasn't aware of, and starting to really determine in my life that sexuality was a really important thing, and intimacy and connection, and leaving my marriage, I thought, oh geez, this is all going to be great, and sex is just going to reappear, and things are going to be amazing, and it didn't. It just actually got worse. And once you get into your 40s, the struggle that I had is I'm a very open-hearted person, very raw and open and caring, and I think my experience as a man has always been trying to please a woman and make her feel happy and comfortable and help solve her problems and all that kind of stuff and be there for them. But as I kind of progressed in dating, it was a really hard thing for me, because I find it at my age, and maybe this is just my experience speaking, but I found a lot of women had a kind of a quiet checklist that they were checking off on the table as they were dating you and talking, and you were moving forward. And it was always a bar that you couldn't ever know where you matched against. So you were kind of constantly trying to find this place that was like, okay, am I fitting in? Am I jiving? And this kind of stuff. But sometimes you'd think everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you wouldn't make one of those little marks on the checklist, and all of a sudden you'd be just kind of like shuffled out the door, and you wouldn't even know what happened. Those are kind of very painful experiences, because in a world where things like ghosting and other stuff happens, where people just stop talking to you because it's far easier than having a conversation that's adult and those kind of things. So a lot of struggle and hurt and pain came from those kind of experiences. And I'm finding it's part of my process is purging all those things and being very angry. And I'm willing to admit that towards the divine feminine for just so much bullshit. And I'm going to be really raw here. I also find there's a lot of divine feminine side that's coming at me from the wounded little girl inside. And part of my process this last little while is just being very, very firm and not standing for silliness anymore in my life, and just standing very solid and asking for what I want, and waiting until sometimes a tantrum happens from the other person, and you're just kind of like, okay, no, are you done yet? And let's move forward, because there's so much energy trying to be grounded and fixed and resolved. It's just a nightmare trying to figure that out. And the other side that's really hard is lack of communication. I find in my struggle, it's very hard to interact with a woman that doesn't say what she wants, and she expects you to meet some kind of expectation. And unfortunately, between 3D and 5D, expectations are shifting away, and the old ways aren't the same. And to be in trouble and to have a person be passive aggressive to you when you don't even know what you did wrong is very hard. And a lot of times I just have to kind of step back and just say, okay, whatever it is, I'll try and sort it out. But until you communicate with me, I can't resolve that. But these are all old patterns I'm seeing that I had struggled with and I've had difficulty with. And I'm hoping I'm not making anybody frustrated by stating these things, but I'm seeing them having to shift and step away, and I have to stand in a new space and ground that, listen, not fix, which is something was really hard as a man to try and fix women's problems. They just want to be heard. But yeah, so it's been tricky trying to find a way and trying to meet women at a space that meets at a heart level and that kind of stuff until the shields are down and you can actually be vulnerable with a person. It's really hard for an open-hearted man to engage that way. It's just like talking into a wall or talking into somebody that's not really present until they've decided that they're ready to be present with you, and that's really their choice, which is fine. But when you start open, it's really hard to go into closed when you're talking. So sorry if I'm rambling a little bit, but that's what I felt called to share. So thank you, gentlemen, for hearing me.
Thank you. And you're not rambling. That's what you're here to do. And the more you talk, the less I have to.
So who's the lucky contestant?
Who's next?
I'll just respond to what you brought up.
Sure.
You know, it's look, this is hard for me to constantly reinforce for myself. But more and more every day, I'm believing that this is absolutely my only truth. It's all about me. Every single reflection is a vibrational match to where I'm at myself, you know, as within, so without. And I'm going to keep seeing what I need to see in order to, you know, clear out whatever that next level is. And, you know, it's an interesting mind fuck. Really? This, you know, this is all my own creation.
Yeah.
You know, nobody else is doing anything to me.
Yeah.
It's taken the responsibility. You know, first it's just wrapping your head around that it's just mirrors of what's inside of me. And, you know, that, look, I've heard that concept for years, I'm only just now beginning to own it, on a consistent moment to moment, day to day basis. When I'm in a shitty mood, I'm going to see other people who are in a shitty mood. When I'm like walking on air, everybody else, for the most part, will be dancing on those clouds with me. But, then again, there's always more, even though you think you got it, which is just the total fallacy. You can be like skipping along, you got your high vibe going, and some other reflection will come along and just go, all right, can you love this? And it's, look, I feel like I'm an Olympian right now, and I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm just going to keep training. This is not an overnight process for me. Maybe it is for some. The when did you wake up question.
Every morning.
Yeah, every morning. Every morning it's like, oh, I'm still playing this version of me. I'm still playing that story, that old story. But, of late, so many of these total bullshit, core, deep, bottom of the rung stories have been coming up, and it's, am I really ready to step into my own power? And what is that? What is it? I've spent so much, I don't want to say wasted energy, but I've spent a lot of energy pushing. I mean, really pushing it. Pushing for this, pushing for that, relationship, money, job, success, whatever, validation. But, I'm in a weird, interesting space that I'm getting used to. And it's kind of a very peaceful surrender. And I'm really in witness mode about it all. Because, I got shit to do. I got a really long to-do list, but my to-be list is actually a lot longer or a lot richer. For example, let's take, the big enchilada that everybody grapples with is money, right? Yeah, man, I need, let's give me some more. And when I go at that for a solution to try to masculine my way through the problem, I get, I'm not coming at it from a sense of peace or centeredness. I'm coming at it, with that, I can fucking do this, and I'm gonna push this button, and I'm gonna throw that lever, and I'm gonna solve it, and this is where the peaceful surrender is coming in, because I've seen it happen countless times. When I don't need something is when it shows up, because somewhere along the line I've relaxed enough to receive. So you can't receive something if you're pushing. And and then there's that other side that goes, yeah, but You should be doing something. It's a very, very tricky line between pushing and going with the flow. But that push can come from a very divinely neutral, grounded, focused, committed, inspired, full body, fuck yes place, as opposed to coming at it from this egoic power trip, like I'm a master of the universe, I can do it, I can create anything I want. Well, no. Yes, maybe I can, but what am I creating? What from what space am I creating it from? And so I'm just figuring that out. I'm just in witness mode to it all, and doing my best to not take any actions unless I'm like, yeah, I don't need to do this. I want to do this. And everything amazing in my life has come unexpectedly when I didn't actually expect it. So I'm really kind of redefining or re-examining what my power is. And I think for this moment, for the last few days, my power has been in my stillness and my faith to not fuck around with it. It's like the intentions that I've put out there, I don't have to keep going and opening up the box of wishes and saying, where is it? No, it's been made. Have a little faith, and be gentle with yourself. I love the term gentle men. So let's own that. And I'll pass it on to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Michael. So, all right. I'll go back to Paul's opening and just draw on my own experience and feelings in terms of not just in my present day, right? So not just being in a relationship with Morgan, but also 2 marriages, dating, and the whole identical dynamics that are involved in all of it, right? So one of the things that I learned in my relationship with Morgan, well, a lot of things, but one of the things I learned was that anything that, and this goes to what Michael was saying, anything that came before me was active in my field. All right. So, for example, if, over the last 2 or 3 years, women would come on to me, I would find myself in this city or that city, and they might have an agenda, and I'm putting my best foot forward, and she would tell me, it's active in your field. Well, I'm not looking for anything. And I'm just using this as an example because it can be many different things, like Paul was talking about. I had to I couldn't understand how it could be active in my field if I wasn't intending that and I carried no thoughts towards that. But we got to remember that we're dealing with polarities. So, as another example, dating or in marriages or in my relationship, even, if there's something coming up in front of me, it may not look like something that I identify myself with, but there's something in me that's drawing it to me. And that's was kind of hard to understand for me, the whole polarity thing. But for instance, Paul's example of, Mr. Fix-It, my need to fix something, as so many men can identify with, is not about what I think. Because what I think is, if I fix it, she'll love me. She'll understand how much I love her. And that's really not what it is. It's an insecurity of wanting to feel that love and forcing that illusion of love onto myself, that externalization of what needs to be an internalization, as we all know. So the polarities I found was very difficult to understand. It's kind of like if you're an empath and you're in a relationship with a narcissist. Well, there's a reason, and so many of us went through that. There's something alive in you that's put that before you, right? So I think for me, what I learned working with Morgan, as from her practitioner side, was to take in both polarities and basically integrate them and own them. Another thing that really jumped out at me was, in retrospect, when she was reviewing our journey, and she says, it was difficult working with you for the first year or two at times. But she said, I had to own everything in you. If you were my mirror, and I guess at the end of the day, we were all each other's mirrors, I have to own everything in you as my own. And that sounds like a little cliche, but if you get down to the nuts of it, it's a real statement. It doesn't mean, if we get beyond just intimate relationships or romantic relationships, it doesn't mean we have to be around that person or whatever. It just means that we can't divorce ourselves from any aspect of the universe. So certainly the person that you're in a relationship with, you've got to own that. So that really struck me. And I guess the last thing I would say, what you both touched on, has to do with the whole fixing thing. And maybe the fix-it thing is just unique to men. I don't think so, because there's a lot of women that came out of conditioning of I'm your kind of like your mother and you're a little lost boy and I need to help you. That's the same frequency. It's the same energy. We don't need to fix anybody. Again, if I look at my feelings and my experience as dating and in 2 marriages and in this relationship, when I'm focused on the other person, it's very simple. I'm not focused on myself. And I would draw a comparison to when I went on the streets and I was coming out of all this trauma and had all this responsibility as a father and as a husband and all this stuff, and it was gone. What I didn't have was my physical, emotional, or mental health. I had a spiritual connection, but I remember hearing very clearly, the best thing you can do for those that love you is to be at your best possible potential in terms of your spiritual health, because the spiritual health takes care of all the other ones. So having said that, and going back to what you both said, the focus in a relationship and the power of its potential, for me, this is me, my own feeling and experiences, I've discovered, is to focus on myself. Not what's going to make her happy, what's going to make me happy. What makes me happy will draw to me in alignment a likewise frequency or vibration or person. And, you know, I've had the luxury of the guidance of Morgan, but I also created it in my own field and attracted that to me at every step of the way. So, and the last thing I will say too is we're here trying to give the feminine energy an idea of what the masculine trip has been like. I am in no uncertain terms understand from my own universe that it works both ways. We all spend so much time trying to be understood rather than to understand. And for me, that was a big one. My little girl taught me that. My baby girl. Paul talked about presence. They're not present. Well, if they're not present, what part of me is not present? If they're not present, is there a part of me that's not present? Just because we think we're present doesn't mean we're present. Just because we see them as having an agenda doesn't mean we don't have an agenda that we're blind to. So I think for me, after going through what I've gone through, I look at the feminine and I understand they have a wisdom in this realm, you know, women's intuition. They don't call it men's intuition, okay? So they had something they brought to the table that I had to learn to honor, love, and respect and listen to in order to tap into my own power. You know what I mean? So we want to be respected. We got to respect it and not just give it lip service, you know? So I don't know. That's what I got from the stuff that y'all said. I'll hand it back over to Paul.
Thank you, Todd. That was beautiful. So the other one I want to talk about a little bit it's been really hard for me as a man is the concept of being a man and being a sexual being, especially in dating. It's a very hard thing. It's this unsaid thing that everybody needs to have at some point to make a relationship possible, but it's a thing that more and more I was starting to learn to be ashamed of wanting sexuality and stuff like that. We're in a world where men don't receive a lot of touch. I started looking at things, and basically once a young man starts to grow pubic hair, basically he starts to get distance from his mother. His mother starts seeing him as a sexual being, and hugs stop and things just get a little bit different. I'm not saying this happens for everybody, but I see it happen quite often. And then this young man, who a lot of times doesn't have a really strong masculine father figure because he's off working and just doing his piece to support the family and all this stuff, then he wanders into high school or junior high school, and there's all these women that are budding and becoming beautiful, and all of a sudden in this world of we see women and girls and stuff are all touchy and feely and enjoying each other and hugging and kissing, and all of a sudden it's now not okay as a young man to do that. So we start to lose touch, and nobody ever tells us why we're losing touch. So we're kind of left to these weird things of our mind where it's like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe they don't love me anymore. I'm not saying this is the same for everyone. And then you get to the point where the only safe place to get touch is to go into a marriage. And that's the way societally it's like, okay, now I can hug and kiss and this kind of stuff and have sex with a woman in a safe way societally. So we rush into marriage, and we're like 18 to 25 or whatever the average marrying range is, and then we jump in and say this is going to be the person for the rest of our life, and we haven't even explored, and we don't even know what the range of life is in sexuality. And then we get in our 40s or whatever, and then we have a divorce because things aren't quite the way we expected them, and other things. And now we get out this other side, and at least in my world, and I teach people about this, sexuality is the most important thing that you can have in your life. That touch, that intimacy, that love that you feel is very important. But we're also in a world where men are a little bit addicted to it. We can't help it. It's porn and all these other kind of things. And it's not that we're weak. It's just the only source of some level of intimacy or sexual pleasure that we can get in our life when we're kind of at arm's length a lot of times in dating around the topic of sexuality, until I've heard things like, oh, I've got a 5-date rule, I've got a 10-date rule, I've got all these kind of things. And I honestly honor a woman for wanting to honor their body and that kind of stuff, and not commit until they feel honored. But it also becomes a power tool and a power trip and a bunch of other things, which really hurts, because men are really controlled by sexuality and a lot of, especially in marriages and other things. And I'm having to heal out of that now. And once again, there's a lot of anger that goes along with that, but that's the way everybody was taught in our society, and it's not their fault. It's what we were all taught to believe, and now we're having to heal through it. I actually am starting to do something where in my dating relationships where I call it a reverse boundary, where I basically talk about sexuality and how important it is to me on a first date, and say whether or not I'm sexually compatible with you is very important, and I don't want us to spend a whole pile of time trying to figure out that our families are similar and all this kind of stuff. That my expectation, and you can be okay with that or not, is that within 4 or 5 dates that this is someplace we go to, and it's a greed thing rather than me trying to prove myself and hope that eventually I'm gonna have checked all the boxes off in that list and made her comfortable enough to share her intimacy with me. These are all really hard things as a man, because we end up getting angry, and I can understand why men pop and then they do things like rape and stuff like that. Not that's something I've ever conjectured, but they just get so frustrated because there's no rules, there's no of when's right, and nobody communicates, and it's all from shame and guilt, and we just get so sad. Eventually people they just get so angry they take, and I don't agree with it. But from a man's perspective, these are the things that we're constantly struggling with, and I can speak from a educated perspective. Women love sex just as much as men, if not more, but there's a whole societal shame around slut shaming and other things for people being too loose. But the wild feminine, the divine feminine, is a woman that's very deep in her sexual power, and she will do what she wants when she wants, but that isn't allowed in this society. So I, as a man, have to start finding a way to let her be in that power and let that happen. And hopefully we're going to a place where it's more an agreed path, and it's not about approving and all this kind of stuff. It's a way where women understand that men are longing for intimacy and touch and all these kind of things, and we're just begging for it underneath, and we're trapped a little bit in addiction because, and that's, a lot of women say, well, I don't want sex on the first date, or all the men are always asking for it. Well, I'll tell you right now, the reason men are asking for it is they aren't getting enough in their world, and they're just frustrated and they don't know how to change that, and they're just going to come out straight because they've went on 10, 15, 20 dates. Nothing ever happened. The woman wasn't clear about how that was going to happen, and they got so angry, and then they finally just walked away, and then they go in with that jaded frustration into every date thereafter. So just speaking from the conscious men's perspective, and I'm not blaming women, I'm saying this is societally where we've all been put, and it's something we're all having to heal. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for sharing.
Michael.
I understand that these are sort of archetypal placements that men have been existing under for a really, really long time, but at the end of the day, it's just a story. Now, I remember when I was very young, I did not grow up in a household that where there was a lot of affection. And I saw somebody, I can't remember who it was. I can't even remember if it was a man or a woman, being so amazingly, purely affectionate. And I was like, I want to do that. You know, and so I made a choice. It's like I became a very tactile, affectionate person without agenda. It was, you know, because I recognized that energy that I saw as a young boy. You know, I've carried that through most of my adult life. Now, then I've also had incredibly long stretches of celibacy that I didn't consciously choose. So, you know, I think that there was a choice that I made to change the story and be an affectionate person. Yet I did still have a lot of wounding underneath it all. So that affection, even if 75% of it was coming from a pure place, there was still that 25% of like a real kind of needy wound in me. And anyway, that was the story. That's it. And I let it play out. I let it play out for a very, very long time. And I guess I'm not choosing to buy into that story anymore. You know, you see people and they can serve as a shining example. And then all we have to do is overlay that, you know. I don't know. In terms of intimacy, there's a meme that I think, Todd, you put it up on your wall yesterday, or maybe it was Morgan, but the gist of it was talking about how playfulness is like the gateway to intimacy. You know, and just for me, that playfulness, that innocence, that childlike innocence is my mastery. You know, it's joy. It's, you know, long before we wanted to like get physical with our best female or male friend, we played, you know, and that is the foundation for me for everything, you know. I want to know if this person can make me laugh until I fall on the floor, and everything else will fall into place if I got that. You know, if this is somebody I can really muck it up with, and because sexual intimacy is, you know, Todd, you've been talking about this for a few days or longer, you know, it ain't what we thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is, and I've experienced this to varying degrees through this long distance energetic that I have with my beloved. And you know, we've been together physically, and now we've been apart for a very long time. Well, not long, but enough that playfulness is that intimacy, that new level of full-on intimacy, sexual intimacy, if you want to call it that. My God, I don't even have to touch her. It could just be a look, and we're both like just blown apart. And I don't have a point here, other than for me, the trick, the magic bullet of the day is returning to my childlike innocence with every breath. Because I didn't have it all messed up in my head. It was pure. And that I can do that. I really can. And I can be intimate with anyone from that space. I don't have to be hooked up with them, but I can be intimate. And trust me, I've been doing that with everybody in my immediate life. And it just, the magic is unparalleled. To see people just go, fuck, thank you. Thank you for seeing me. And, you know, I don't know if I'm giving any insight to the male perspective. My mode of operation since I can remember is I honestly don't see that much difference between us, between the male and the female. Yeah, we may be wired differently, but at our core, we want to play. We want to be free. That's it.
Thank you for sharing. All right. So I'm going to go back to my own experience, full life experience, my feelings in those experiences, and where I'm at today. Okay. There's nothing to do with anyone but me, right? So, we live in a society, a world where you fuck first and try to become friends. I see nothing wrong with becoming friends, and somewhere down the line there may or may not be intimacy. So what happens if you make a friend and there never is any intimacy? Well, you've made a friend. What have you lost? What have you gained? Right? What have you lost? You didn't get banged? What have you gained? You've gained a friend. You've expanded your consciousness. You've expanded the universe, right? This is me. This is the way I see it. I'm not saying this. If it's me, whether I was single today or whatever, sex is not a factor. Sex is not going to be a factor in who my partner is. Sexual energy is the most indelible imprint we have energetically in our lives and in this realm, as evidenced by the extremes of sacred sex and the extremes of sexual violation. Right? Our biggest heights and our biggest traumas, right? It's not a toy. And it's certainly nothing to hold, from my own perspective, it's certainly nothing to hold somebody to. Because ultimately we're talking about ourselves. Now, as a man, getting back to the theme of the show, I believe that I was measured, that my power as a man was measured by my performance, which goes way beyond the bedroom and way beyond romantic relationship. Until I realized that judgment was not being made by anyone but me, of myself. Okay? Did I not start to see the light? Start to see the light, okay? Because at that point, your balls get cut off and you realize you have no power, because the power that you identified yourself with was nothing. but it was also your biggest burden. So I focused on instead of focusing on the power that I lost, which really was no power at all. I started to focus on the blessing of the burden of no longer having that string tied to me anymore. So I didn't know what to do from there, but I knew I was a lot cleaner and a lot freer. So we're talking about a man's perspective on this trip. And, you know, I can only offer my perspective. I don't think there should be a 5-date, 10-date rule. I don't think there should be any regard to sex at all, because the true intimacy is found on the front end. And believe me, if it's a match, it will happen on the back end in ways we can never imagine. This is what I'm experiencing and feeling. You know, and I'm just at the tip of the iceberg. But it's a very serious matter, because it is the most deep line of separation in what is the last level of separation, gender. Okay? And I'm with Michael. I don't think there's that much difference. I don't. And the stories are the stories, so we don't need to talk about that anymore. So I just think, go back to what I said earlier, what I've learned in my own, that it's kind of like, if you want respect, you got to give respect. But where we came out of, I'll use the example of what Paul said about a man wanting to be touched. I totally get that. And I think every man does that's honest with himself. So the question is, if you look at the what we're calling sex or intimacy in the traditional way, nakedness, laying together, if you look at that, in my own right, if I look at that, why am I touching her? Now I can tell myself, and I can train myself to be a master manipulator and push her buttons, but who am I really manipulating? Myself. If I'm touching her and telling myself I'm doing this because I love her and because I want her to feel good, bullshit. I'm doing it so she'll touch me, right? So I get past that, and I start to realize that we've got a whole universal playground here. She's a universe. That energy, that feminine energy, is an entire universe. And we have all the time in the world. So I'm just playing in the universe. And what comes, comes. So I guess what I'm saying is if we examine, as men, why we do what we do and what we've done, I realized how deep that conditioning went and how much I was blind to. So, I was given the word Soulogy, the other side of truth, a long time ago, and that always meant to me, instead of searching for the truth, just remove the lies. And it's come to be more and more and more meaningful to me because I don't even know what the truth is, but I know if I can remove my lies, the magic does come. It really does. So I think as men, our focus in this topic we're talking about, again, goes back to take the focus off of her. Because whatever problem you have with her, it's obviously not with her. This is the Ascension game. We all know this is the apocalypse, the unveiling of ourselves. And so I have to say that to myself. Focus on me, and everything will be okay. And so if and when the circumstances arise and I find myself in the presence of a divine feminine partner matched up, it's taken me a while, and I still don't got it all, but I think I'm really, really there, right there on the edge, is even in intimacy, holding hands, a peck on the cheek, doing something. I'm doing these things because they make me feel good. And if I'm aligned with somebody, they're going to make her feel good, right? So taking the focus off of them isn't just taking the blame off of them. From my perspective, from how I feel and what I've experienced, it's also, I've learned with some help, to take the focus off of what's going to please her. Because if I'm happy with it and I'm aligned, and that person's aligned with it, then that's the person. If they're not, then I remember hearing one last thing. I remember hearing, and even when I met Morgan, as much as I was drawn to her, as much as I knew, okay, I always said, whatever the universe has in store for me is something as good or better than what I could imagine with this person or with another person. So, that's my take, or that's my part of this, or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, man. This or something better.
Absolutely.
And even in these days, we're in Hawaii. We're doing our work. On the surface, it's a hand-to-mouth existence. This new world is appearing around us, and there's magic, and there's synchronicities, and there's signs. And we've seen 6, 7 shooting stars in 6, 7 different nights as we're talking in perfect synchronicity. But even in that regard, there's always that unknown. And so whether it be a romantic relationship, whether it be our own journey, whatever it is, to me, that always rings true. But that's complete faith. That's complete surrender. So I really, really am honored to be having these discussions, because I know that it helps me.
Me too.
And I've got to believe that as the individual goes, so goes the collective. It helps other people. So
Yeah,
deep breath.
yeah. Every one of these stories that I hear, it's like, ah. I don't care. I don't give a shit about theory, but it's like when I see a real, raw, vulnerable, authentic person breaking down or opening up or just laughing their balls off, that purity, that's what reminds me to stay awake.
Each step of this journey is unwinding all that old programming and all that old stuff, but the more we talk about it, the more we see that it is programming, and start to step into a much clearer view, like Todd said. And it's all about us, and that's not selfish. We got to concentrate on ourselves, our own security, our own happiness, our own all that stuff, and then we can be this beautiful thing where you can enter into a relationship with someone else, and it's about filling them from your overflowing, not filling and hoping to be filled back. It's a whole new way of doing things, right?
Yeah.
Programming.
Mm-hmm.
And this
That's
is
what it
the
is.
best
Forgive
programming.
Mm-hmm.
We have to change the channel.
Yeah, brother. I love that one. We have to change the channel.
Seriously, just change the fucking channel and watch some other shows. Mm-hmm. Watch this show. Watch that person. Watch that. People who light you up, who you admire, you respect, you honor. Watch those shows. Mm-hmm. Study them. Turn off this the old stories. It's programming.
Mm-hmm.
So change the channel.
So I cannot fix somebody. I cannot make somebody happy without being imbalanced. That's where the resentment comes and all that crap we've all dealt with. So that, to me, it's just this subject and everything is going back to the same thing. Faith is to thine own self be true, and having faith that the universe is going to match, is going to align with you. Right. So I'm with Michael. Let's cut out the complexities and drill it down. Right. Yeah.
Just be open-hearted, vulnerable, and approach wide open and see where things go. And there's no agendas. There's no nothing in that. It's the best way to see a person in my world.
Yeah. I think personally, everybody ought to just take their clothes off and walk around naked, because that's really energetically what we're doing.
There's no shame in that.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe that's the whole philosophy behind nudist camps. I don't know.
Well, you'd get rid of body shame pretty damn quick.
As a kid, my mom took me to a nudist colony, and I walked around in my underwear for 3 days until I felt so much the odd man out. It was like, oh, fuck it. And I took them off. And I felt so much more comfortable. But man, it took me 3 days of walking around in my tighty whities, as like a 7-year-old.
Once you've done that once, it's with you for the rest of your life. It's just like you're open. It's like everybody's got their own little wrinkles and dimples and other stuff. And some of the workshops I've been in, the most beautiful people that we think are amazing have the exact same body shames as we do. It's just to a different scale. And once you start realizing that, it's just programming again. And then everybody's beautiful, and you look in the soul, and they're all the same. The body's just the story.
Yeah, exactly. The mask. All right, guys. Until the third episode. Thank you for honoring us with your presence and sharing space with us today, everybody in the crowd, and you too, my beautiful brothers.
Thank you. Is that Return of the Jedi?
I never watched it.
Anyway.
All right. I'll see you.
Thank you, guys.